Hello? I need to see you now. It's very important.
We need to move you now. It's not safe here.
You want me to move into your property? I'm not running.
I'm not asking you to run. I only want you to be safe. I'm asking you to move to a different location. I'm sure it's safer.
The threats started on a Wednesday. The first one was simple. A folded note slid under the studio door overnight, found by Minji when she arrived to open up in the morning. Leave Seoul, you are already dead. Minji had assumed it was a prank, that kind of thing disgruntled neighbors sometimes did. She had thrown it away and not mentioned it to Sena until that evening, and by then it was gone, and there was nothing to show Yoon-sul except Minji's recollection of the words, which was clear enough. The second arrived 3 days later. A photograph slipped into Sena's bag while she was on the subway. She found it when she got home, a printed image of her taken from across the street, dated 2 weeks ago. On the back, in neat handwriting, "We know you are alive. We know who is helping you. It would be better for both of you to stop." She called Yoon-sul before she had finished reading it. He arrived in 14 minutes, which told her something about either the traffic conditions or where he had been waiting. She showed him the photograph. He looked at it for a long time with an expression she was beginning to understand, the perfectly controlled surface over an interior that was anything but. "We need to move you," he said. "I'm not running," she said. "I know you're not running. I'm asking you to move to a different location so that whoever is watching the studio doesn't have a fixed point of reference." He looked up from the photograph. "I have a property in Hanam-dong. It's registered under a company name, not my family's name. It's secure. You want me to move into your property. I want you to be safe. The location is secondary." She looked at him steadily. In the 3 weeks since their conversation in her kitchen, the night he had told her about Eliana, the night they had decided to be a we, something had been shifting between them. Not the recovery of memory, not yet, but something older than memory. The body's intelligence, the deep cellular knowledge of a person you have loved. She found herself turning toward him in rooms, found herself reading his silences the way you read the silences of someone you have known for years. Found herself once reaching automatically for his hand when a car had backfired on the street and startled her, and finding his hand already there. She had not commented on it. Neither had he. "All right," she said. "I'll move." The property in Hanam-dong was the kind of quiet that money buys, not the showy quiet of a space designed to impress, but the functional quiet of high ceilings and good insulation, and windows that looked out over a garden rather than a street. Yoon-sul showed her around it with the slightly formal courtesy of a man who is very aware of the weight of what he's offering, and she followed him from room to room with the slightly formal interest of a woman who is very aware of the weight of what she is accepting. "There's a studio space," he said, opening a door to a large, north-facing room with good light and a broad work table. She stood in the doorway of the studio space and looked at it, and felt the particular lightness of being, known, not remembered, known, in the present tense. "You set this up," she said. "I had someone source the materials. I didn't know exactly what you'd need." "It's right. You got it right." He said nothing, but something in the line of his shoulders shifted just slightly, like a structure settles when a long-held tension is released. She moved in that weekend. The investigation had been running in parallel for weeks, fed by information from Yoon-sul's private investigator, a former police detective named Hwang, who had the compact, watchful quality of a man who had spent many years seeing things he was not supposed to see. Hwang had been working on the case since the week after the crossing, and what he had found was the beginning of an architecture. The hospital records from the night of the accident had been altered, not clumsily, carefully by someone with access and technical knowledge, but altered nonetheless. The original intake record showed a patient transferred from Sinshan Severance to an affiliated facility in Incheon for specialist neurology care. The amended record, the one that had been presented to Yoon-sul in his grief, showed a patient who had died on the table in the early hours of the morning. The discrepancy was a single data point, buried in a system that no Grievel family member would have had reason to query. The nurse who had been unavailable for follow-up, the one the first investigator 3 years ago had found suspicious, had received a payment of 12 million won to a private account 2 weeks after the accident. She had since left Seoul. She was not findable. The DNA report that had confirmed the dead woman's identity, the report that had been returned faster than the standard timeline, had been processed by a private laboratory that 1 year later quietly closed its doors after a regulatory audit found irregularities in its procedures. One of Yoon-sul's relatives, his father's younger brother, a man who had sat at that family dinner in Songbuk-dong and watched Ileana with the assessing eyes of a man identifying an obstacle, was a major investor in the private laboratory. "It's not a full picture," Wang said, at the kitchen table in Hanam-dong, his laptop open and his coffee untouched. "It's enough of a picture to know what we're looking at." "My uncle," Yoon-sul said. His voice was level. "His investment in the lab is documentable. The payment to the nurse is documentable. The record alteration will require a specialist to testify, but the raw data is recoverable. It was backed up to an off-site server that the hospital itself seems to have forgotten about. We're working on accessing it legally." Wang looked at Sena. "The couple who found you, the Bays, I've spoken to them. They're willing to give statements. They kept records, photographs from the first days, hospital records from the private clinic. They kept everything." Sena had been sitting very still at the end of the table. "Why?" she said. "Why did they keep everything?" "Mrs. Bay said she felt something was wrong from the beginning. She said you were terrified even when you were barely conscious, and she kept records because she felt you might one day need them." Wang paused. "She also said she prayed for you every day." Sena looked at the table. Her jaw was tight. Yoon-sul reached across and put his hand over hers, and she did not move away. "When do we have enough?" she said. "Another 3 to 4 weeks. For the server data, for the nurse's testimony, that will depend on whether she's willing. For the rest, we're close. In 3 to 4 weeks, whoever is watching me could decide not to wait." "Yes." She looked at Yoon-sul. "Your family. If we do this, when we do this, you lose them entirely, whatever is left. I lost them the day they decided to kill you. There was nothing to lose after that. You might lose the business, the inheritance. There are members of the family who weren't involved, cousins, your brother." "My brother," he said, and something moved across his face that was private and unresolved. "It's a separate conversation." She searched his face. "He didn't know?" "I believe he didn't know. It's a distinction I am still working out how to hold." He squeezed her hand once and released it. "But what I am certain about is this. Whatever I lose, it is less than what I already lost, and the only thing I want is the thing that is sitting at this table." Wang suddenly became very interested in his laptop screen. The memory came back in pieces, and then all at once. A song first. Yoon-sul had been in the kitchen making tea. He had begun spending more evenings in Hanam-dong, initially under the reasonable pretext of security, and then with less pretext and more honesty. He had put on music without thinking, something he had been in the habit of playing for years, a playlist he had built in the months after the funeral, because every song on it felt like talking to someone who wasn't there. She had come through from the studio, wiping varnish from her hands with a cloth, and then stopped in the kitchen doorway. The song was something slow and warm, a song that was not famous, but that he had played for her once in the car on the way back from an exhibition in Suwon. And she had asked him the name of it, and he had told her, and she had listened to it on her own phone 3 times in a row when she got home, which he had known because she had texted him about it at midnight. "I listened to your song. It is the most melancholy, beautiful thing I have heard in a long time. You have good taste for a man who almost crushed me with citrus fruit." Standing in the kitchen doorway now, she went completely still. "What is this song?" she said. Her voice was different, careful in a way that meant something was happening. He turned to face her. "Do you know it?" She shook her head, but her hand had come up to press against her chest. "Something is happening," she said. I can't." She pressed her eyes shut. "There's a car. It's night. There's a voice, your voice." She opened her eyes and stared at him, and they were bright with something that was not quite tears yet. "You're telling me the name of something. I can't hear the words, but I can hear your voice." He crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and stopped in front of her and said very quietly, "I'm here. Take your time. It's all right." "The mandarins," she said, suddenly. He went very still. "Citrus fruit," she said. Something fell. I was laughing. You were on the ground. I was laughing at you in a car park. You were on the ground and I was laughing at you." "You were," he confirmed, very gently. "You were entirely correct to laugh at me. I was ridiculous." She lowered her hands. Her face was wet. She was looking at him the way someone looks at a familiar landscape seen through a clearing fog. Not the full view yet, but enough. "Do Yoon-sul," she said, and this time she said it differently than she had said it before, not as a name she had learned, but as a name she had always known. "Do Yoon-sul." "Ileana," he said. She closed her eyes. He watched her reach for it the way you reach for something in the dark, by the shape and warmth of it rather than the sight. "I remember the coffee, the vending machine. It was terrible coffee and we drank it anyway because neither of us wanted to stop talking." A breath. "I remember the exhibition, the Park Sebo. I was right about Park Sebo." "You were absolutely right about Park Sebo." "I remember the dinner." Her voice shifted. "Your mother's white dress, the way your father didn't stand up." Her jaw tightened. "The envelope." "Yes, I remember." And then her breath caught, sharp and sudden, and her hand went to the scar at her temple, and her face changed entirely. And he reached for her without thinking, and she did not flinch away. She leaned into him, and her hands closed in the front of his jacket, and she said against his shoulder in a voice that was completely different, raw and shaking, "I was crossing the road. I was going home. I remember the lights. I remember the car, and I remember..." A sound came out of her that was not a word. "I remember being afraid. I remember knowing what it was. Even then, I knew." I know. I'm sorry. I should have..." "Don't," she said. She pulled back just far enough to look at him, and her green eyes were streaming, but her gaze was steady, clearer than it had been in the 3 years of her careful, reconstructed life. "Don't apologize for something they did. That is not your fault to carry." "Ileana, I remember you. I remember you. I remember all of it." He held her, and for a long time neither of them moved, and the song played out in the kitchen, and Seoul turned outside, enormous and indifferent, and in the Honnam-dong property registered under a company name, 2 people stood in a kitchen and breathed, and held the enormous, fragile weight of what they had both survived. The confrontation with the Do family happened on a Tuesday morning in the glass-walled boardroom of the Do Group headquarters in Yeouido, and Yoon-sul had spent a week preparing it with the focused, surgical precision of a man who has been holding a controlled explosion inside himself for 3 years and has finally decided where to aim it. He arrived with Hwang and 2 lawyers. He had arranged the meeting under the pretense of a family business discussion, a restructuring proposal, something that would bring his father and uncle and 2 senior family members to the table without announcing its real purpose until the doors were closed. His uncle knew something was wrong before Yoon-sul had finished sitting down. The man had the animal instincts of someone who has spent a lifetime managing threats, and Yoon-sul watched him calculate the presence of the lawyers with the rapid, cold efficiency of a threat assessment. "What is this?" his father said. Yoon-sul put a folder on the table. "This is a record of what your brother arranged 3 years ago," he said. "The payment to the nurse, the laboratory connection, the forged DNA report, the altered hospital records which we have now recovered from a backup server." He put a second folder on the table. "And this is a record of the monitoring operation that resumed 3 months ago, when your people discovered she was alive, which you knew before I did. which means you have spent the last 3 months deciding what to do about a woman you already tried to kill once." The room was very quiet. His father's face was the face of a man watching an edifice he has built over decades begin to show the precise and specific cracks that mean it is about to come down. "Yoon-sul," he said. "I am speaking," Yoon-sul said. He had never in his life interrupted his father. The feeling of it was extraordinary. Not power exactly, but clarity. The clarity of a person who has shed everything unnecessary. "I am speaking, and you will listen, and then I will tell you what happens next." His uncle's expression had not changed. He was watching Yoon-sul with the particular stillness of a man who is still calculating. "She is alive," Yoon-sul said. "She is safe. She has recovered her memory. She remembers everything." He looked at his uncle, "including the night of the accident, and what she remembers is admissible." He put a third document on the table. "This is a statement from the couple who found her. This is a statement from the clinic that treated her. This is a statement from the neurologist who has been treating her for the past month. And this," he put down the last item, a USB drive, "is the recovered server data." His father reached for the drive. "Don't touch that," Yoon-sul said quietly. "That is a copy. The original is already with the prosecutor's office." Silence. "What do you want?" his uncle said. His voice was even. He was a man who had managed crises for 40 years, and he was managing this one. "I want accountability," Yoon-sul said. "I want the people who received payments to give their testimony. I want the laboratory's records, all of them, disclosed to the investigation. I want the monitoring operation ended today, every individual involved identified and their activities documented." He looked at his uncle. "And I want your resignation from every board position you hold within the Do Group by the end of this week." "And if we don't comply," his uncle said, "then everything on that drive and everything the lawyers have filed in 3 separate locations this morning goes to every major press outlet in Korea simultaneously." Yoon-sul folded his hands on the table. "I have nothing left to lose. You should keep that in mind when you assess how serious I am." His father said in a voice that had gone strange and unfamiliar, "You would destroy this family. You destroyed this family the day you decided a woman's life was less than the family name. I am simply the person who is making sure there are consequences for that." He stood. "My lawyers will be in contact by end of business today. I'd encourage you to have yours ready." He walked out of the boardroom. In the elevator going down, he stood very straight and breathed through his mouth and did not allow his hands to shake until the doors closed. The weeks that followed were the kind that aged a person. The investigation became public when a former employee of the private laboratory spoke to a financial journalist about regulatory irregularities, and from that first small crack, the entire structure began to come apart with the specific, unstoppable logic of a dam breach. Huang's evidence was handed to the prosecutor's office. The nurse was found in Busan and agreed to testify in exchange for leniency. 3 members of the Do family's legal team resigned. 2 board members of the Do Group voluntarily stepped back pending investigation. Yoon-sul's older brother called on a Thursday night. "Tell me it wasn't father," his brother said. No greeting. He sounded like a man who had not slept. "It was uncle primarily," Yoon-sul said. "Father knew. Father was not the architect." A long silence. "Is there a distinction?" "Yes," Yoon-sul said. "Not a sufficient one, but yes." Another silence. "Is she all right?" "She's recovering. She's strong." "I want to—" His brother stopped. "I don't know what I'm asking for. I don't expect her to speak to me. I don't expect you to either, maybe. I just—" He stopped again. "I didn't know. I want you to know I didn't know." "I know," Yoon-sul said. "I know you didn't." "What do you need from me?" Yoon-sul sat with that question for a moment. Outside the Hannam-dong windows, Seoul was dark and lit and enormous, and inside, Eliana was in the studio space working late, the way she did when she needed to think, and the sound of her moving around in there was the most orienting thing in his life. "I need you to tell the truth to whoever asks," he said. "That's all. Whatever you know, tell it. Don't manage it. Don't protect the family at the expense of what happened to her." "All right," his brother said. "All right," Yoon-sul said. They stayed on the line for another minute without speaking. the silence of two men who share a history they cannot simply put down. And then his brother said goodnight and hung up, and Yoon-sul sat in the quiet for a while. Then he got up and went to stand in the doorway of the studio space. She was working on the lacquered panel she had been returning to intermittently for weeks now, that damaged 18th century piece that had come in with a long crack running diagonally across its face, and she was working on the crack with a tool that was less than a millimeter wide, with the total focused absorption she gave to things that mattered. She did not look up, but she said, "That was your brother." "Yes." "How was it?" "Better than I expected. Not as good as I hope it will eventually be." She set down the tool and turned on her stool to face him. She had flour on her collarbone from the bread she had made that morning. She baked when she was anxious, she had discovered, which meant they had eaten a great deal of bread the past month, and her hair was loose, and she looked in that moment like every version of herself simultaneously. The graduate student in the car park, and the careful, reconstructed woman on the studio step, and the person who was slowly, day by day, becoming both and more. "Come look at this," she said. He crossed the room and stood behind her and looked at the panel. The crack was almost invisible. Under her hands, the break had been filled, sealed, matched so precisely that you had to know it was there to find it. "You can't see it," he said. "You can see it if you know where to look," she said. "You'll always be able to see it if you know. That's the thing about restoration. It's not about making something look like it never was broken. It's about making it whole again in a way that includes the breaking." She looked up at him. "I think that's what we're doing." He touched her face, carefully, the way you touch something you are afraid to drop. "I think so too," he said. She leaned into his hand. Not the uncertain lean of the past few weeks, the lean of a woman still measuring the distance between instinct and trust, but a full, complete, deliberate lean. The lean of a woman who has decided. "I called my mother today," she said. He went very still. "I remembered her number," she said. "I don't know how, my brain just—" She exhaled. "She picked up on the second ring, and I couldn't say anything for the first 30 seconds. I just cried. And she started crying, and then we talked for 2 hours, and I don't remember everything we said. It was too much to hold all at once. But she knows I'm alive. She knows I'm safe." Her voice had gone rough at the edges. "She said she never believed I was dead. She said a mother knows." Yoon-sul sat down on the stool beside her and put his arm around her, and she put her head on his shoulder, and they sat that way in the studio, with the lacquered panel in front of them and the city outside, and neither of them said anything for a while, because some things are too large for language and must be carried silently until they find their own weight. She flew to Lagos 6 weeks later. Yoon-sul drove her to the airport. He stood in the departure hall with his hands in his pockets and watched her check her bag at the counter. And she came back to him and looked up at him with green eyes that remembered everything now, every single thing, and she said, "You're not coming. This is yours, your family, your return. It should be yours." She tilted her head. "You are infuriating, you know that." "I have mentioned it. I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks." "I know. And when I come back—" She stopped. Something moved across her face, and it was not uncertainty. It was the opposite of uncertainty. The face of a woman who has come through fire and knows precisely what she wants on the other side of it. "When I come back, we are going to talk about the rest, about what comes next, about all of it." "I know that too," he said. She put her hand against his chest and felt his heartbeat under her palm, and he covered her hand with his. "Every Sunday morning," she said, "I used to call her. Every Sunday morning at 9 o'clock, and then one Sunday I didn't call, and she told me today she sat by the phone for 6 hours before she accepted I was gone. 6 hours, waiting." "She doesn't have to wait anymore," he said. "No. Ileana, and she was Ileana now, entirely and completely. Ileana, who was also Sena, who carried both names, both lives, the whole, broken and whole of herself, looked at the man in front of her, the man who had stood at her grave and still doubted, who had sat across the street on a folding stool eating onigiri in the November cold because he could not come back, who put music on without thinking and not known that the right song in the right moment would begin to unlock a door that 3 years of quiet survival had left closed. "I love you," she said. and she said it the way she had said his name that night in the kitchen, not for the first time, but as though for the first time, which is the way all real things are said. He pressed his forehead to hers. "I know," he said. "I have been waiting." She laughed, the real laugh, the car park laugh, the one he had been waiting to hear as much as anything else. And she kissed him once and picked up her carry-on and walked through departures. And at the gate she turned and looked back, and he was still there, hands in his pockets, watching. She raised her hand. He raised his. She went through the gate. 3 weeks later, Ilyana Nando came home to Seoul. Yoon-sul met her at arrivals, and she walked out of the gate with her mother beside her, a tall, warm woman with the same steady eyes, and a grief that had become relief, that had become joy. And Yoon-sul stood in the arrivals hall and met Chidera Nando's gaze across the crowd. And she looked at him for a long moment with the measuring look of a woman who has assessed a great many things in her lifetime. And then she nodded, once, deliberately. And that was enough. The legal proceedings against the Do family's involved members continued through the winter. The case was complicated and slow, as such cases always are when money and connections are involved, but Hwang was relentless and the evidence was solid, and one by one the walls came down. Yoon-sul's uncle resigned his positions and was formally charged. The laboratory records were disclosed. The nurse testified. The altered hospital records were officially recognized as fraudulent. It made the news, inevitably. The Do family name, one of Korea's most recognizable, attached to a conspiracy to kill a young foreign woman because the heir had chosen to love her. The story was reported and discussed and argued over, as such stories always are, with the full range of human responses from outrage to disbelief to the particular defensive discomfort of people who recognize the attitudes that made such a thing possible and would prefer not to. Eliana gave one interview to a journalist she trusted, and she gave it sitting in the Jongno restoration studio with a half-finished piece of lacquer work on the table in front of her, and she was measured and clear and entirely without performance, and when the journalist asked her what she wanted people to take from her story, she said, "I want them to understand that what happened to me was possible because certain people decided I was worth less than a family's reputation. And I want them to sit with that, not with me specifically, with the idea, with who they have decided is worth less, and why." The interview was shared widely. Yoon-sul watched it from his phone, sitting in the departure lounge of Incheon Airport, waiting for a flight to London for a business meeting, and he watched the woman he loved say difficult, true things on a screen, and felt, with a completeness he had not felt since before the car park with the mandarins, that the world was in some specific and irreducible way all right. He sent her a text, just, "You were extraordinary." She replied 30 seconds later, "Obviously, go catch your flight." He went and caught his flight. On a clear Saturday in April in the park near Hongdae, where a convenience store still sold terrible vending machine coffee, Do Yoon-sul got down on one knee. He had not planned a ceremony. He had not hired anyone or arranged flowers or informed anyone in advance, because Eliana Nando was not a ceremony person, and he knew her. He had always known her, in the way that went deeper than memory. He had simply asked if she wanted to walk, and she had said yes, and they had walked to the park, and the spring light was doing what spring light does to Seoul, which is to make it look like something out of a dream, and she was wearing a yellow coat she had bought in Lagos that made her look like the sun had taken personal shape, and he stopped at the edge of the park, near the bench where they had once sat for 3 hours arguing about Basquiat, and he knelt. She looked down at him. Her green eyes, his compass, his constant, the thing that had survived every attempt to extinguish it, went very bright. "I had a whole speech," she said. "I know you did. I can see you abandoning it in real time." "You are very distracting," he said. "Yoon-sul," she said. "Ask me." He opened the box. Simple gold, 2 thin strands twisted together, a small green stone at the clasp. She pressed her mouth over it. He had found a jeweler months ago and described the bracelet she had brought home from the studio, the one that had begun to open the door, the one she now wore every day on her left wrist, and asked them to make it into a ring. Eliana Chidera Nando, the mandarins, the vending machine coffee, the 3 hours about Basquiat, the grief I don't want to talk about in a public park, the 3 years, the crossing in the rain. All of it, every part of it, including every part that was terrible. I want all of it to have been the beginning of the rest." He looked up at her. "Will you marry me? Again, properly, with full information and full memory, and both of us choosing it with everything we know." She was crying. She was also, because she was entirely herself, laughing at the same time. "Yes," she said. "Obviously yes." She reached down and pulled him to his feet and put his face in her hands and looked at him, and he looked at her, and the park moved around them, ordinary and beautiful and full of Seoul's relentless life. "You knelt on the dirty ground," she observed. "The ground I loved you on seemed appropriate," he said. She kissed him, and the yellow coat blazed in the April light, and somewhere nearby a food cart was doing brisk business in tteokbokki, and a child was chasing a dog, and the city continued, enormous and indifferent and miraculous, and in the middle of it, two people who had survived an extraordinary amount were simply, completely there. They were married in August, in a ceremony that took 2 days and 2 countries to properly contain. The first day was in Lagos, in the Nando family compound, where Chidera had spent 4 months planning what Eliana privately described as the most beautiful, controlled chaos she had ever witnessed. There were 200 people, most of whom Eliana had not seen in 3 years, and who received her return with a volume and warmth that Yoon-sul, who had grown up in the particular quietude of the Do family's brand of emotional suppression, found both overwhelming and deeply, privately moving. He wore traditional attire chosen by Chidera herself, white and gold, and he sat in the place of honor and received the blessings of people who told him, variously, that they had better treat her well, that they were watching, that she was the most stubborn woman in the family and he would need patience, and that they were glad she had found someone who had looked for her. "You looked for her," one of Eliana's aunts told him, taking his face in both her hands, in the way of a woman who feels she has earned the right. "When everyone told you she was gone, you looked for her. That is not a small thing." No, it is not. The second day was in Seoul, smaller, quieter, at a venue in Bukchon that Eliana had chosen because of the light, the way it came through old paper screens and lay on the wooden floors in long, warm bands. Yoon-sul's brother was there with his family, and there was between the brothers the careful, working warmth of 2 people rebuilding something that had been damaged but not destroyed. Min-ji from the restoration studio was there. Hwang was there, wearing a suit that suggested the occasion had surprised him. The Bae family, the couple who had stopped on the road to Inshan, were there, and Eliana held Mrs. Bae's hands for a long time before the ceremony and said something to her in a low voice that made them both cry, and which she did not share with anyone. During the ceremony, in the moment of the formal vows, Eliana took Yoon-sul's hands in hers, and she said, departing from the text they had agreed on, because she had always thought better on her feet than on paper, "I don't remember choosing you the first time. I'm choosing you now with full knowledge and full memory and both eyes open, and I would choose you again in any version of this life, even the versions where you drop citrus fruit on car park floors." There was laughter. There were tears. There was the specific sound of a room full of people who have witnessed something they will remember. He said his own vows, and he kept them brief, because brevity had always been his natural language, and she had always known how to read it. "I looked for you when I thought I had lost you. I will not stop looking. That is my only vow." Outside, August Seoul was doing what August Seoul does, hot and thick and green, the city in full and relentless bloom, and inside the paper-screened room, 2 people who came the long way around to the same destination stood in the light and breathed and held the evidence of everything love can survive. If this story found its way to your heart, we would love to know. Drop a comment below and tell us what moment hit you hardest. Was it the crossing in the rain, the kitchen and the song, the proposal in the park? Like this video if you want more stories like this one. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new episode. Share it with someone who believes in love that doesn't give up. And remember, some things are worth looking for, even when everyone else tells you they're gone. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next one.